Well, this is it. Referendum day has finally arrived in the UK and a record number of people have registered to vote. The question could have been written by that most famous of Britons, William Shakespeare, to leave or not to leave the European Union. Millions of people all over the UK are voting, braving the typical British weather, which means rain. They're being watched all over the world and their decision will be known early on Friday. Now, in a moment, we'll be talking about all things Brexit with our reporter in London and getting relationship advice for the country from a marriage counsellor. We'll also be on the trading floor in the City of London, where activity is frantic. But first, Yvette McCulloch reports on what has turned out to be a very difficult marriage.
We're not big enough. We're overdone. We're full.
A domestic argument after more than 40 years together. The marriage between the United Kingdom and the European Union is on the rocks. This was the wedding day. British Prime Minister Edward Heath saying "I do" when he signed the Treaty of Rome to join what was then the European Economic Community. No more than 3 years into their new relationship, the Brits were getting cold feet and called for an in-out referendum. But 2/3 of the British people decided to give it a second chance, until a certain woman came along.
We have not successfully rolled back the frontiers of the state in Britain, only to see them reimposed at a European level, with the European superstate exercising a new dominance from Brussels.
The relationship stumbled on for a few years, and then the big argument of 1992.
The government has concluded that Britain's best interests are served by suspending our membership of the exchange rate mechanism.
The Brits moved to a separate bedroom, taking the British pound out of the ERM on what was known as Black Wednesday. In 1992, 12 European states renewed their marriage vows and moved even closer together, becoming the European Union.
With economic and monetary union, the 12 member countries can hope to draw the greatest possible benefit of a common economic area with its social dimension too.
But Britain didn't want to give up the pound. The relationship seemed to be treading water until a young British Prime Minister freshened things up.
We're quite determined to play our part. As the UK, we want to work in close partnership with the European Commission. As I say, I consider it a privilege for us to take on the presidency of Europe at this important juncture.
But as in many marriages, there was a battle for control and identity.
There are now more Eurosceptics in this Parliament than there have ever been, and many of them do not subscribe to ever closer union.
David Cameron was forced to act, giving the people of Britain a second chance to reassess the relationship.
It is time for the British people to have their say. It is time for us to settle this question about Britain and Europe.
And as with every relationship on the rocks, lots of people are getting involved, all claiming to know what's best. But the buck stops with the Brits. Divorce or not, it's hardly been boring.
Well, let's cross now to Asha Tanner, who's in London. Asha, the weather seems to have cleared up a bit behind you, especially after that awful thunderstorm overnight. Things like that can really affect turnout, can't they? And in this referendum, even turnout can affect the outcome in one direction or the other.
That's absolutely right, Matthew. The voter turnout is crucial in this particular campaign. And as you mentioned, the weather, the polls are saying at the moment it could go either way. But of course, the older generation are in favour of leaving, and they are the ones who are most likely to come out and brave any downpours. Now, this campaign has seen a long and bitter campaign with public attacks on both sides, as well as misleading claims coming from both the Leave and the Remain campaign. Many of the papers on Thursday saying actually the fate of Britain lies in the hands of the undecided, because the polls say it is too close to tell. And the Electoral Commission are hoping to release the final results sometime during breakfast on Friday.
OK, Asha, a record number of people have registered to vote. Just for our viewers outside the United Kingdom, can you just explain why this has been such a passionate few months and why this vote is so important to the people in the UK?
That's right, Matthew. 46.5 million people are eligible to vote. And this is the first time since 1975 that the UK has been able to have a say in whether they want to be part of the European Union. The Leave campaign has been saying that immigration is a real problem. 300,000 people are currently within the UK, and that figure is just not sustainable, they say, and it cannot continue. They've also said that the UK needs to have more sovereignty. It does not want to see Brussels making the decision some 200 miles away. Boris Johnson, who is leading the Leave campaign, says that the UK is shackled to Brussels and that June the 23rd should in fact be seen as Independence Day. Whereas David Cameron, the Prime Minister and also leading the Remain campaign, has said that he would like to see people think about putting jobs first as well as the economy first. The Remain campaign has really focused their strategy on the economy. They say the market will go into meltdown, the UK could face a deep and long recession. They've also highlighted the fact that the EU trade deals could be in jeopardy. So there's a lot to play for here, and people need to make a decision, and they should try and make that decision as soon as possible because, as I mentioned, the polls could go either way.
OK, Asha in London, thank you very much. Now, breaking up is hard to do, or is it? Relationship counsellor Jonathan Hoban joins me now from Bembridge in the Isle of Wight via Skype. Jonathan, in all your years of advising couples, have you noticed that some people actually wish to leave an unhappy relationship, but they stay because better the devil you know than the devil you don't? In other words, they don't want the uncertainty of breaking up, even if they have an inclination to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all healthy relationships are about negotiating and being clear about what it is that you want from the relationship and finding a way to move forward rather than moving into a split, your safety needs being threatened and moving back into past positions.
And of course, you've got to keep the two parties talking. That's essential, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think at the minute, parties are talking, and that's exactly what needs to happen. Negotiations need to continue.
But there has been a breakdown of trust, hasn't there, between many people in the United Kingdom and Brussels?
When love bonds and connections and trust is broken down in any relationship, what's being threatened here, to really simplify it, are safety needs.
Now, regardless of tomorrow's vote, would you say that there has been harm done to the relationship?
I think it has caused a lot of harm because it's really affected the interpersonal trust between other members in Europe and people in Britain. And I have to say, over the last 2-3 weeks, that's all I've heard. I've heard that Europeans no longer feel welcome in London, and I think that's a real symbol of the fact that safety needs have really been affected because of the split that's being created and the split that continues. It's that old thing, divide and conquer, and again, this is just what happens in a family dynamic when two parents don't agree. We create splitting.
OK, well, relationship counsellor Jonathan Hoban there from the Isle of Wight. Thank you very much. Now, the campaign has been vitriolic, but how have the markets reacted? Azar Sukri has been following the twists and turns of how the debate has affected the value of the British pound, and it has been up and down, hasn't it?
It certainly has, Matt. And the pound began falling on about February the 20th, as soon as David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, announced the date of the referendum, and it hit its lowest point in several years a week later. But over the next 2 months, bookmakers' odds showed the probability of a Brexit falling. And with that, the pound rose against the dollar, hitting a 5-month high on May the 2nd. But comments by the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, reversed some of those gains. Johnson said that the EU was trying to create what he called a superstate, echoing Margaret Thatcher's comments. That helped drive the pound down to a 3-week low by May the 15th. Now, by late May, opinion polls showed the prospect of a win for the Leave camp receding, and the pound was on the rise again. But the campaigning on both sides was already toxic. And then on June 16th, Labour MP Joe Cox, a supporter of the Remain campaign, was murdered. That and comments by Chancellor of the Exchequer George Osborne helped push the pound briefly to a 3-month low. He warned there could be punishing tax increases if the UK leaves the EU. But over the last week, once again, the race tightened with a slight swing towards the Remain camp. And as voting got underway on Thursday, the pound rose to its highest level all year.
Very interesting, Azza. Of course, these things are crucial to importers, exporters, and to people earning in foreign currencies who are remitting their incomes to the United Kingdom. Thank you very much for that analysis. Well, that's brought us up today where we are politically and financially. And of course, one place that's watching this poll more closely than anywhere else is the markets. A vote to leave the EU could well cause mayhem there. Our reporter Taig Enright was on the trading floor a short while ago in the City of London.
Well, traders here in London and, of course, elsewhere in the world are effectively placing their final bets today on which future British voters will choose. The voting will continue until 10 o'clock London time, and that means that even US equity markets will have closed by the time polling here ends. Well, Ipek Ozudskaya is a senior market analyst here at London Capital Group. Ipek, what is the mood like today?
Well, it doesn't feel like we are on June 23rd. This is not the June 23rd that we would imagine a month ago. It seems like the market is quite relaxed, and there is no such sign of panic at all. We have started a positive session in Asia, and now we're positive in the UK.
It's the value of the British pound, isn't it? That's really been one of the clearest indicators of investor sentiment over this referendum. What have we been seeing today and I suppose more recently?
Well, actually, since the beginning of this week, we have seen the pound rallying against the US dollar and even against the euro. We have seen the GBP US dollar hitting a 6-month high at 148.44 in Asia. And it seems that the investors are not showing any signs of panic or not selling out the pounds before the Brexit referendum results.
It sounds like investors are pricing in a Remain result. Is that borne out in the bond markets too?
Well, actually, this is what we see also. The bond markets are quite relaxed. We have seen the 10-year gilt yields going up to 133%. So this is quite almost 20% higher than June lows at 110%.
OK, Ipek Ozudskaya from London Capital Group, thank you very much indeed. Well, the counting of votes will begin as soon as the polls close here in the UK at London time, 10 o'clock tonight. And we do expect there to be a result before the markets open in Europe tomorrow.
Plenty more coming up after the break on Money Talks. Protests continue as French politicians debate Labour reforms ahead of a crucial vote. We take a look at the global fight against illegal drugs, with the United Nations issuing a new report. And we examine how pension schemes are mismanaged globally.